What's going on YouTube? Welcome to episode 131 of the U.S.S. Enterprise D tutorial. I just want to thank you again for tuning in today's episode. If you haven't, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, helping me and supporting the channel. I can't thank you enough for that. And of course, be sure to check out the Discord. I'll have a link in the description below. Right now I'm doing a poll on my next ship build, so if you want to get involved in that, be sure to join the Discord. When you do, click on next ship build poll, or excuse me, next build poll. There we go. And I've accumulated a list based off the top requests I've received on YouTube for Minecraft. And for whatever reason, if there's a ship on there or something that's not on there that you'd like to see me build, you can go under build suggestions and add your suggestion that you'd like to see me do. This is actually going to be the only way I'm going to be taking suggestions moving forward. Just so I can have everything together and people can actually vote on, upvote the ones that they like. But anyway, let's go ahead and jump right into today's episode. I had talked a little bit about this in the last couple of episodes, color coding our decks. Now, I did this off camera because, to be perfectly honest with you, this is something that I don't think anybody really needed a tutorial to do. Right now we're in the front of the ship on the crew deck, which is the main deck that connects to the secondary and tertiary shuttle bays. I've changed this color from that purplish color to, or excuse me, magenta, there we go. I changed the magenta to red for the crew deck, and then below we're going to be swapping that out to that purple magenta, and then the top deck on the saucer, which would be the medical deck, that'll be blue. So we got a couple of cool things that we're working on today. We're going to be adding in our cross-section corridors on the entertainment deck, because right now we have our bottom deck here, but it's not connected to the middle hub. We added in our corridors going up to the wall of the aquarium, but we need to basically connect the center with these the left, right, front, and back hallways. And we're also going to be adding in an additional set of turbo lifts on the left and right side of the ship. Because it's something else I talked about, that just having that convenience to get around your ship on something this scale, you want to have a couple of different turbo lifts. Now, next generation, you know, their way of getting around this is that the turbo lifts can go up, down, left, right, but we can't do all that in Minecraft. So the easiest solution to get around that is just really to have multiple turbo lifts around. So this way we can get around our ship just a little bit better. So right now we're going to determine our placement for our turbo lifts. But I think the problem that I'm having right here is that my turbo lift doors that I'm making are only 2 wide, which isn't going to go with the design for the rest of the ship. I think that we can get away with like maybe having 2 sets of doorways, like to go into rooms, like whether that be 3 wide or 2 wide. But with the turbo lifts, I think that's going to be a little bit harder. So what we're going to end up having to do is go off of our cross section with the white terracotta and build off of that, so this way we can have 3 wide and it still be even with the with our rows here. So we're going to take out this middle row and 1 on each side, and this will be the template for where our turbo lifts will go. Now, pretty cool. We won't be really getting into this today, but right around this area, actually right below where we are right now on the entertainment deck, this is where the holodecks are going to go. And I'm really looking forward to getting into building the holodeck. That's going to be actually be coming up fairly soon. And we'll be actually fleshing out one of the holodecks as an active one. I kind of did this a little bit on the Cerritos on a much smaller scale. This is, since we have the room to take advantage of it, we're going to be building out like a massive city area from the Big Goodbye. And I think that'll be really cool and something that you don't really see on builds in Minecraft too much. But anyway, talking a little bit more about what we got going on here, you can see that I just closed in the right side cut, and we're doing this basically to move it over a little bit because at this point I've already determined that this is where my holodecks are going to go. And I basically want to make sure that I have enough room to do it. So I want to have it pushed all the way over to the left as much as possible for the right side. And then on the left side here, we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to go after that first cut line and delete the middle and then one off of each side. So that's looking pretty good. And while that's going, just some cool things to talk about. I just recently had a watch party on the Discord channel, which was fairly successful. I had a couple of people show up for it. I did have a lot of people saying that they wanted to do it, but they just couldn't make it for that one, asking me if I was going to be doing more watch parties on the Discord channel. And I think it's a fair assumption at this point to say that that's definitely going to be a thing going forward. Just something to keep the community with, and yeah, I think that we're going to be doing that once a month. So if you'd like to, come check out the Discord and join us when we do those watch parties, that'll be pretty cool. Now, with what we have adding right now for my cuts here for our turbo lifts, you can see that I added in blue for the top row, the middle we're going to do red, and then that magenta for the bottom. This is just falling right back into our color coding of our decks. I'm telling you, this is going to make it so much easier to get around your ship when you have a better idea of where you are. I've had this problem a few times as I was going through this thing, and color coding it just seemed the best way to go about it, even though it wasn't necessarily canon within Star Trek, because in TNG those black stripes on the sides of the corridors, those were actually GPSs, because you could walk up to the computer and say, hey, take me to the holodeck, or hey, take me to the bridge, and a light would appear and show you the direction that you need to go to get to the closest turbo lift to get to that deck, and they would take you right there. Unfortunately, since we don't have that, we kind of got to think outside the box, and the color coding was just the best way to go about this. And I was kind of scratching my head just a little bit, like as far as like what colors to use. It kind of made sense, like red for crew, blue for medical, and then yellow for the engineering deck. But then when I got hit with the entertainment deck, I was like, man, what color should I use? And the magenta one was really the only one that I could think of that looked good. I looked at a couple of different colors. I think at one point I was even thinking about using a green, but I just kind of steered away from that. I think the color set that I have now is going to work out fairly well. All right, now that we have our doorways in place, we're going to build out the floor templates for our turbo lifts. Now, normally I would skip over this because we have built out our turbo lifts a couple of times on here, but I think we're going to be doing, in today's episode, I believe that we are going to start the cutouts for the straight intersection corridors for the bottom entertainment deck moving into the center of the ship. I mean, I should have, in all honesty, I probably should have planned that ahead of time. But you're just going to be hit with these scenarios sometimes when you're working on your ship. You may not think of everything all at once. But this is also, again, why it's kind of imperative to have a lot of your walkways in place and everything before you start adding stuff. And I actually just made a mistake on this side. I'm going to have to move all of these back by one row because I did not add my white terracotta row. And that's going to mess with me until I fix that. So definitely be sure that you have your color coding row to determine what deck you're on, followed by white terracotta, and then we start our cyan floor. So this way you don't have to repeat the mistake that I just made. But no, it's just going to be one of those things that you're going to have to make some changes as you go to maybe accommodate the things that you want to be able to add in your ship. And to be perfectly honest with you, do I need to have a cross intersection on the bottom deck going into the center? I really don't. However, I think for the purpose of staying consistent, that's something I need to do. And that's just, it goes into, for me anyway, the attention to detail, you know, making sure that if you have that, again, this falls right into your design cues, that if you're doing something a certain way, especially on a starship, it's important to see that through anytime that you do that. Um, but I think this is going to work out fairly well. I mean, it's going to make us have to backtrack a little bit to add in that cross section, but when it's done, we'll have consistency throughout the ship, and that's really the main reason on why I want to do it. As you know, we spent all this time working on the Enterprise D. If there's something that we have to backtrack on to fix it, I would rather do that at this point. A smaller ship, um, even though it's small, I'm not going to lie, I'd probably still do it anyway, just because I like my ships to look as good as I can, I guess. That's really the easiest answer I have to that question. But I think this will look really cool when it's done. We'll have a lot of accessibility to get to multiple decks from different areas. I'll make things a little bit easier to go around. I may not necessarily use all these turbo lifts when I do the tour, but you know, another reason too why I'm adding these also, not only for convenience for myself when I'm going around the ship, but also you take into consideration the fact that um, there's supposed to be over 1,000 people living aboard this ship, so it's not very practical that you have just one turbo lift. You know what I mean? It would make sense even more at that point that you'd have several of them, because you've got so many people that are going to be getting around just to help with the crowds. You'd want to try to alleviate that as much as you can, you know? But I think this will work out pretty good. Aside from the other side, on this side that we're on right now, I built out the turbo lifts perfectly. But again, pointing out my mistake on the other side, I did include that white terracotta, so that's going to have to be something that we're going to have to address and fix in order to have our turbo lifts where they need to be. Now, the very bottom deck, we can get rid of this cut because we're not going to be going down any further below. We can put our staircase in, or excuse me, not our staircase, our ladder. That'll help us go up and down. I've seen people use the water for the ladders. Um, I have one build that I did years and years ago that I used the water ladder, and I'm not gonna lie, like, to be perfectly honest with you, it's a lot of fuss to go through, where the ladder basically serves the same exact purpose, and it does the same thing. And it really doesn't look that much different. It's a single block that brings you up and down. Now, if there was a way that I can make an actual functioning elevator, that would be something that would be worthwhile doing. And I've seen people do things like that with the redstone. I've tried to repeat that myself, but I've never really got it to work. Um, period, really. And it's just one of those things I just kind of gave up on after that. I really don't use redstone all that much in my builds. That was something even with the Enterprise D, I had intended to have automatic doorways on most of the ship, but because I went all in with the interior of it, I basically cut myself off at the knees and I ran out of room. So that's why you're going to see during this build that we're really not going to have many, if at all, as far as the automatic doorways, just because we don't have the room to do it. In order for me to really have been able to do that, I would have had to have designed the interior a little bit better as far as the layout. I probably would have been able to fit 3 decks on this ship and the saucer, and I probably would have been able to do just 2. I would have had to have them placed a little bit differently than what they are right now, so I had the hang room below them to build out the piece that's required to make the automatic doorways work. It's on my 2016 Enterprise A, the first retrofit that I did. That has the automatic doorways. And even the Discware Enterprise, that has a couple of them, but not as many as the 2016 Star Trek Beyond one. you know, it's just one of those things. I would have liked to have incorporated it. There's even sections of the ship, like right now I'm looking at, considering like, man, like, is there a way I can add these automatic doorways in? And I'm just kind of having a hard time with that. So don't be surprised if you don't see me include them on this build. Now, with that being said, because I had the issues that I had with the Enterprise D in that specific area, that's something I'm going to try to combat going forward, to try to design my interiors a little bit better so I can include that stuff. Because I don't know, I think that's one of the cool things about the 2016 Enterprise I did, that it had the automatic doorways. Helps makes the ship come to life just a little bit more with those. But I don't think it's necessarily hurting the Enterprise D not to have them. Um, but I mean, yeah. So we're looking pretty good so far. I think what I'm going to end up doing today is skipping past fixing the other turbo lift. That'll probably cut down the run on today's episode a little bit. I probably should have edited that out a little bit, but not going to lie, I would have had a hard time with it because there is another part in today's episode that we need when we start cutting out our corridors. And even one thing that I'm doing right now, I'm going through my recording sessions, and I'm trying to eliminate the stuff that we've already touched on. Because you'll probably notice that, like, even where you're at right now, there's certain sections of the corridors that they aren't fully completed. Like as far as like the hubs and whatnot, where the intersections of the different corridors meet. You know, I have a template that we did in a previous episode on how to do that, but I haven't gone through and done it for every single one. And the episodes or the screen captures that I have where I go through the rest of the ship, I think I'm just going to take those out. I already got rid of a couple of them before I did today's episode because they were actually going to end up being on today's episode. And it would have taken up the majority of it. We wouldn't even gotten into what we're into right now. So that's going to be something that I'm going to be doing going forward. You know, I talked a little bit about that in the last couple of episodes, that I want to try to streamline my tutorials a little bit, not backtracking and retreading over the same things, even though that's kind of what we're doing right now. But we really needed to, because I wanted to make sure that we got the placement right for these turbo lifts. Because I can see somebody having an issue with that. So I decided to show it. But smaller things, I doubt that we'll be doing a retread on those again. And the channel's slowly progressing too. We're getting there to a point where there's light at the end of the tunnel as far as me getting to 1,000 subscribers. We still have a ways to go, but I'm anxiously awaiting once we hit 1,000, because I'll be able to do this tutorial on the 2016 Star Trek Beyond Enterprise A 1.1 refit. I'm really looking forward to doing this build. So if you can, help me out. Share today's episode. Share the past episodes, any ones that you've liked or past builds. Try to help me out to get some more subscribers, because the sooner we hit 1,000, the sooner I'm going to be doing the tutorial on that. And I've got a lot of really cool stuff prepared in the future leading up to that. I've got the 3D model, the Enterprise 1.1 that I designed, that I'll be getting printed in the near future. And I'll be doing a tutorial on assembling that once it's printed, and painting it and adding the decals and everything, just as a way to keep that ship relevant while we slowly approach hitting 1,000 subscribers. Now I think what we're going to do here is I'm going to end up skipping forward, because we've already done that core turbo lift the right way. So you need to make sure that you correct that issue with the white terracotta. We're just going to move on from it, and we're going to move on to the next part in today's episode, which is our walkways. So now we're down back in the entertainment deck, in the very dead center of the ship where the aquarium is. You need to cut out your intersections for your left, right, front, and back. Now what we are going to have to end up doing is the entertainment deck in the very dead center is one block lower than our corridors wrapping around it. So what we're going to ultimately have to do here is we're going to have to delete a layer of the roof and move up that room in the very center up by 1 block. I'm not going to go and do it to have that included in the tutorial. That's something that you guys are just going to need to do, or make any changes that you feel that you need to make that work. But again, you know, since I've already showed building that out, I'm not going to retread that, manipulating this whole room to make that work out. Yeah, because adding in this block, the roof's going to be down a little bit too low, and we have no choice but to move everything up by 1 row. Not a huge significant change here, but it's a change enough that we're going to have to backtrack a little bit to get it right. And see, as soon as I did that, I got water coming in here, so I have to close that off, and then I can get rid of it, the sides again. I'm not gonna lie, the one mechanic I don't like about Minecraft is that when you build, like in this case, a shaft underwater, and you close that in, it's still filled up with water. You would think that since you're eliminating that water source, that it would just dissipate with the water, but that really doesn't happen. We have to go in, we have to fill up that room, or in this case, the turbo or the corridor. We have to fill it up completely with blocks and then delete the blocks in order to get rid of the water. So now I'm not going to do this whole roof right here. I'm just showing you an example that we need to go up one more. We need to get rid of 1 row on the ceiling here. And then again over here with the glass, we're going to have to fill in the bottom row. We're going to have to move everything up by 1 row. And I just say, take your time with this. You know, look at your surroundings, what we currently have. Think of the best way for you to do this. I've already got it printed in my head how this area looks. And the easy thing too is that we have 2 other decks, or excuse me, 1 other deck to reference off of this to help us out. So if you get stuck somewhere, just look at your previous deck above you for a little bit of a reference as far as what to do. But I don't think anybody will have a problem with this. This is pretty much self-explanatory at this point. Just taking everything that we have and moving it up by 1, because everything that we're adding in now with like the white concrete, this is going to be our floor. So that's why we're replacing that glass, because you won't be able to see it once we add in our flooring going all the way around. And the exact pattern is going to be the same. We're going to do a row of gray going along the cut line and then the blue. No, because I've even been considering how much more I'm going to be doing on the Enterprise D. I know that I'm going to run through the last set of videos that I've recorded. Past that, I'm really kind of trying to decide the direction I want to go in. Like I said, I know I'm not going to be fleshing out too much the crew deck. I've already added in a template for the crew quarters that we did in the last 2 episodes. So you have the template there so that you can add those crew quarters pretty much at your discretion on that deck. I think at this point, as far as stuff that I'm planning on adding before I call this thing done, that I, not counting the stuff I've already completed that you guys have yet to see, but just stuff that I still need to do. I need to build out the medical deck a little bit, and then I have to add in a couple more rows of windows on the outside. I have to do the registration, and then again, in the back end of the lower hull, I have to figure out what I'm going to do with that area. I honestly might just end up closing off the turbo lifts and having most of that area just open, because I honestly, for the life of me, I can't figure out what I want to do there. And it's just something I've been thinking about a lot, because we're already at episode 131. if I really wanted to, I could probably we could be working on this thing for the next year easily, because there's just so much room to fill in on this. But I wasn't intending the Enterprise D to be this long of a build. So I think what I'm ultimately going to end up doing is focusing on the moments and things that appeared in the show and things that people would look for. And outside of that, I might just end up calling it a day. Um, but I think one of the good things that could end up being with that, even though there might be some areas that weren't fleshed out on this build, actually a lot of areas, it'll leave room open for people to add in things that they would want to do. So it'll be a lot of customization with this build that you can do, which is pretty cool. Um, I mean, it's not necessarily something I want to do, but at the end of the day, there's other builds I want to do, but I want to make sure that I do the Enterprise D justice. So I think if I do what I have planned, I think people will be satisfied with it. I think I will. I'll be able to walk away from it at that point. I might end up maybe one day coming back and adding in some more areas, even though I'm not planning on it. Um, I have been known to do that in the past with other builds where I'll stop working on it for a while, I'll come back to it and add some more stuff. If that ends up happening, I may end up doing some more videos on it. But I'm, basically just trying to forewarn people that I wouldn't expect for that to happen, because I would have to have a pretty significant reason to come back. And I mean that's there because I want to flesh out as much of the ship as I possibly can, but I don't want to do it with just a bunch of random crap is what I'm getting at. And that's something that I see people do more often than not on Minecraft when I see them do their ship builds, that they'll just have, the same area repeated over and over and over and over and over again. And while, that helps with it making your ship feel more grandiose, it's not really fleshing out your ship all that much. Um, and again, with the size of the Enterprise D, even if we had done that, we'd be here all day. We really, really would. And I mean, this is the other thing too with the Enterprise D. This was the first Galaxy class I ever built. This was one of the reasons why when we did the Disco era Enterprise, why that build was, there really wasn't too much that I backtracked on. I think when we were on the lower hull, I think there was a ring on the saucer that I redid, and then the outline for the lower hull. And other than that, like there was no repeats on it, and that's because I had done so many Constitution classes. I had been used to working with that type of ship class in the past, um, and that's why we really didn't have that many problems with the Cerritos. Really, pretty much the same thing. Um, Very similar shapes working with the Constitution class. Galaxy class ended up being a whole different type of animal, where I just there were some sections of the ship that took time to get done right, um, namely the neck and the deflector dish, which is crazy because we still have one more edit to make to the deflector dish before we're going to call it done. But I am going to include it in the tutorial because I'm actually really happy with where the deflector dish ends up. It looks fantastic. It's not perfect, but I'd say it's within like the 98% satisfaction point that I'd want to at least be at. Um, and I know that we're going to be making. I don't think we made the last revision to the engines yet with the half slabs. We might have. I don't think that we did actually. Now that I think about it, so that will be coming. If we did do that, don't hold it against me. A lot of this build has turned into a blur because it's hard to keep track when you've done 100. Excuse me. It's hard to keep up when you've done 131 episodes. So if I did do that, don't hold it against me. If I haven't, don't worry, that's coming. Yeah, so the easiest thing to do here, now that we've got our actually starting to add in our hallways within the aquarium, um, Easiest thing to do is just to do the walls first floor and then fill it in. So this way when we delete stuff, we don't have to worry about any water coming in. The one cool thing about this with the separation, because originally what I had envisioned to do was that I wanted to have a massive tank so that the dolphins could be able to go around that whole area. And what's ultimately going to happen now with adding in these corridors, um, it's basically going to separate the tank into 4 sections, which will be pretty cool because what you can end up doing, you can actually now have different areas um, established in the center. So like you can have, each corner can basically be for a different type of aquatic life. Maybe one of those sections you don't want to have aquatic life. Maybe you want to have that as more of a zoo area and actually have some farm animals or stuff in there. Even though we are going to be doing something kind of like that, I wanted to have a little bit of fun with the build, and I added in kind of like a greenhouse area where I had built it right by the mess hall that I built on the ship, and I wanted to have an area where it looked like there was a section that where they grew their own food basically, because I know in TNG, they had the replicators, but I find it hard to believe that everybody would love the replicators. I feel like some people would, they'd be old school basically, or they wouldn't trust replicators, like they'd want real food. And the only way to really combat that would be to have some type of greenhouse to grow that food, for those people that wanted something that was real. And that was kind of like my main thought process on adding that stuff. I try to, a lot of this you're probably thinking like, well, why are you going through all the hassle of figuring this stuff out? And I think that's one of the appeals to my ships and why I make the decisions that I do. One, I want to talk about this stuff so you guys can understand why I'm making the decisions that I'm making. And two, it's, it's staying true to what we saw on the show. Even though we never actually saw um, a greenhouse area where people could grow their own food on the ship, at the same time, it's I think it's safe to assume that they had that because they had arboretoriums on the Enterprise D where they had live plants and stuff like that. So it would just kind of make sense that they would probably accommodate, you know, the type of crew that didn't want to eat synthetic food, basically. All right, we're looking pretty good so far. Before we finish closing in the walls here, what we're going to need to, or excuse me, the ceiling, and then just filling in this whole compartment with blocks so we can get rid of the water, we need to do our floor first. Now, one thing I did not do in this episode, but something that you're going to want to do, you're going to want to fill in that bottom row. The reason you're going to want to do that is so that fish don't get stuck underneath your walkway. This is something that I did not honestly foresee happening, and I ended up having that problem when I added the dolphins back in, when I was really honestly just determining, like, okay, why aren't the dolphins, why are they disappearing? Like, I'm not going to include it in the tutorial, but there's probably like 6 or 7 recording sessions I'm probably going to end up deleting because it's just a waste of time to go through it where I can just talk about it and tell you guys what I did to try to combat the dolphins despawning. Um, I went on YouTube, I went on Reddit, I went everywhere I possibly could, even taking suggestions from the community from people on what they thought. I tried taking out, first thing I did was I took out all the seaweed and all the coral rocks and everything, thinking that maybe that was snagging them. The next thing I did after that, I got rid of all the other fish in the tank, any other type of life in the tank other than the dolphins. That didn't work. From there, I actually went in and I added name tags to all the dolphins in the tank. That didn't seem to work. After that, I went in and I actually lowered the water level, or actually, that's not true. I raised the ground level. I added 2 more layers, or 2 or 3 more layers of sand, so that they only had too high on a water level. And the crazy thing about that even with the too high, they still despawned. And I was noticing like they'd be getting stuck on each other. I was thinking like, okay, well maybe, just maybe, that having too many dolphins in a tank is bad. I even tried with two, and literally nothing I did worked. Basically, I think what it came down to, somebody had said it in the comment section on Discord, and honestly, I agree with them. I think what's happening and why we're not able to keep dolphins in our tank is because the area that we're putting them in has a roof ultimately. Um, I actually I had seen that on one of the Reddit posts a while ago, but I think I misunderstood it. What I got from that, from what I had originally seen, was that you can't have any blocks hanging over the water line to stop them from coming up from water, which is something else that I actually addressed. I took care of that, and still, like, they were still despawning. And again, I think what's happening is that the hull roof, the top side of the saucer, basically, is what's stopping the dolphins from staying. That they'll just despawn. Which honestly, it's unfortunate. I haven't actually tested that theory out, like making an open tank um, outside of the Enterprise D in the open air, and seeing if that was in fact the reason why they were despawning. But it wouldn't surprise me if it were. And it's actually like it's kind of unfortunate because I'm not gonna lie, I spent a decent amount of time trying to figure that out. But anyway, we've actually hit the end of today's episode, but we are going to cover one last thing before I let you guys go. So you see we have our lines here. Everything that you just saw me do for this left side, you're going to want to do this for the right side, front, and rear. Build out your corridors connecting to the center. Once you do that, you want to fill in your floor. The template's already here, so that it should be fairly easy. To fill all this stuff in. This is why I'm not going to cover it in today or tomorrow's episode, because we've already done it. For whatever reason, if anyone does get stuck in this process and you need help, drop a comment below. I'll try to help you out if I can. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap us up today. I just want to thank you again for tuning in today's episode. I hope everybody has a happy and safe week, and I'll catch you in the next episode. And of course, what did you make in Minecraft today? Let me know in the comments section.